All right. So for the past few months, I've been following this topic that President Trump has been proposing. In 2017, he proposed a project called the Keystone Pipe or XL pipeline. So what it is, it's a pipeline that connects to one of Canada's major energy providers, which is called TransCanada. And it's in one of the provinces called Alberta, which connects all the way down to the United States from North Dakota all the way down to Texas. Now, what he wants to do with the project is to actually cut down from Montana to Oklahoma down to Texas. Now, the proposition that I'm here today, talked about today, is that this project will increase the problematics environmental degradations in the United States. Now, recently, or actually 2 years ago, in South Dakota, there was an oil spill 200 miles near North Dakota. Now, in an article from Richard Gonzalez, who's a national desk correspondent for the NPR, states that around 210,000 gallons of oil has been spilled near a town. Now, the thing is with that, the year later, in 2018, another spill happened at the same location, which was almost twice as much gallons of oil spilled in that area. Now, from a report from Matt Keslow, in his article, they're stating that there's other oil spills around the U.S., not just Keystone. Similarly, in Michigan, almost 500,000 gallons of oil was spilled, and it took 3 weeks to finish it. With that being said, that if the oil spills keep happening, this is a problem for environments, for supplying resources. It might contaminate water supplies near local areas. For that, the second point I'm trying to make is that the continuation of the Keystone proposal will actually contaminate the lands of the local communities of native reserves. With this new project, a lot of locals, especially the native tribes of the native reserves, are actually worried that if this project were to go forward, because right now, one of the district judges in Montana, Brian Morris, who's actually have stopped this construction twice, one in November 2018, and recently, a few weeks ago. The reason why Brian Morris is stopping for this proposal is because that with this proposal, Donald Trump is ignoring the environmental regulations, and that with this, it causes a lot of problems with an issue that's going to go around, such as climate change. An article from National Geographic from Sarah Gibbons and Craig Welch, they state one of the local locals saying that even though the spills were not around water, they still damaged the land, such as nutrients, like I said, water supplies, food products. And another article from Sarah Sachs in 2017, who's an environmental journalist, states that if the proposal were to go, it could contaminate the an aquifer, Agolala, I'm trying to pronounce it. It's one of the largest aquifers. It's a supply of drinking water for 2 million people, and if it were to be contaminated, it will be up to 5 billion gallons of water. Now my third point is what I'm trying to state is that the construction route will actually damage the habitats of different species. During the construction of, when the construction of the proposal happens, during the route, the construction with the deforestation will actually, like I said, increase environmental degradation. A lot of endangered species, such as wood cranes, which is at risk in the area because when there's going to be construction, there's going to be a lot of construction power lines, which they could fly into. And another endangered species, such as the great sage grouse, has already lost its habitats during the if the construction were to go. And with the destruction of many habitats because of deforestation and others, like making new roads for the construction, many more animals will be endangered, extinct. Right. Well, to conclude, with this new project, a lot of oil spills will be problematic and high possibility. It will also, with high probability, will contaminate many more local communities and endanger other life species.
All right, Brian, the proposition's clearly identified. You distinguished the Keystone Pipeline from the Exxon Pipeline. I'm not clear if it's the same pipeline. I assume that it is the same thing, and I think you need a little bit more context on it. The notion that this pipeline is, originated with Trump is problematic. It's been planned for a long time. That Trump is advancing it, I think, is definitely true, and but I think there's long-term objections to it that have existed prior to the Trump administration, so some of those probably could be included in your argument here. There's no contents preview at the beginning of the speech, so that's a little bit of a problem. And in the body of the speech, some of the secondary points, they're not always stated definitively as claims, and sometimes it's a little bit passive when you get to them, and you need to be a little bit more active and declarative in stating what your position is on those points. I did see an organizational structure, so I appreciated that. For the most part, you tried to explain ideas and concepts. All of the examples of the spills that you talked about on the first point, though, it sounds to me like they're happening under existing pipelines as opposed to the proposed pipeline, and so you're drawing an inference suggesting that this is the kind of thing that would happen to the proposed pipeline. So they're not illustrations of a problem that exists with the pipeline that you're talking about, but potentially that this pipeline could have the same kinds of things. I think that needs to be a little bit clearer in your argument. The environmental damage from the spills that you mentioned, the two in the same location in South Dakota, you later on talk about how it's going to contaminate the ground and potentially hurt species. And so my question is, well, if we've got two examples in the same place, what's the data that we have from there that tells us that this sort of thing happens? And I didn't hear anything information-wise about those kinds of things. So I think you need to have a little bit more information about those particular spills, not just that they existed, and I know that you had the information about how much oil they spilled, but the question is how much damage did they do also, because that's later on a subject that comes up in your argument. The second argument seems to suggest that there's going to be a potential contamination of the aquifer. That needs to be explained a little bit more. How close is the pipeline going to be to the aquifer? How many miles or meters, or what are the distances that are involved there? Is there any assessment of what the level of risk is? Because right now we're dealing with a hypothetical. This could happen. That that's a possibility. Is it likely to happen? Is there a probability of it happening? Have precautions been taken? Are the precautions inadequate? We need some more information like that. And then basically on the third point, we're back to the issues of what the harms are going to be. You do have two particular examples of animal species that you mentioned that are threatened. I thought that those were pretty effective in making your point. Again, this is one of those things where it would depend a little bit on where the spill occurs and how big the spill is. So and one question is it likely to be any different than the kinds of spills that were already occurring, and that's why we need to know a little bit more about what the damages from those particular spills is going to be. So if we're going to make an inference here, it would be easier for us to arrive at a conclusion. All right, thank you.